Hello, this is Bruno, pelletier-bacquaert. Well, this is another video on Fly Me. Either I lied the last time or something happened. What happened? Well, what happened is that several people asked me specifically about the thirds and sevenths. Because it's true, I keep referring to the thirds and sevenths of the chords, whether on this tune or on any other tune, and people are telling me they have a hard time locating those thirds and sevenths. So I'll try to explain, the different steps that you could go through. Well, first of all, it would not hurt to know a little bit of theory, namely how are our chords built. All the chords that we're using, they're all seventh chords, whether they're minor sevenths, major sevenths, dominant sevenths, etc. They all are considered seventh chords, which means that they all have 4 notes. They all have a root, which gives its name to the chord. They all have a third, which could be either a major third or a minor third. They all have a fifth. Most of the chords we see have a perfect fifth, but sometimes the fifth could be raised, in which case we think of it as an augmented fifth, or it could be lowered, in which case it's a flat fifth or diminished fifth. That's the chord, for instance, with that's the case for the half diminished chord. It has a diminished fifth. And then finally the seventh, which can be either a major seventh for the major seventh chord, a minor seventh for the dominant seventh chord or for the minor seventh chord. Also the minor 7 flat 5, what I called half diminished a second ago, that's the same chord. It also has a minor 7th, and it could also have a diminished 7th if we had a diminished 7th chord, the fully diminished 7th chord. There would be a diminished 7th. So a root, a third, a fifth, a seventh, and you need to memorize the formulas. What kind of third does this chord have? What kind of fifth does that chord have, and so forth. That's one thing. But on the fretboard, what I recommend you learn first and foremost when it comes to your chords is what we call 3-note voicings or shells. And it's this kind of chord for the A minor chord, for instance. So I'm going to systematically find the root of the chord on the 6th string or on the 5th. And since there are only 3 notes out of the 4 potential chords, potential notes that my chord should have, it means one of them is being ignored, and it's going to be the 5th. So we are going to put aside the 5th, and the only notes we're concerned about now will be the roots of the chord and our famous thirds and sevenths. So if I'm looking at this voicing here, I have A here at the 5th fret, G on the 4th string, also on the 5th, and C on the 3rd string, also on the 5th fret. So all my notes happen to be in the 5th fret. So those of you who know this big old A minor 7 chord, you are already playing those notes. They're there, right? So if we make sure we only see and play those same 3 notes, there they are. So I have A, G, C. In other words, A being the root, G being the 7th, and C being the 3rd. And I have a variation of the same chord here. Now I'm playing the root of my chord on the 5th string, the 3rd on the 4th, and the 7th on the 3rd string. So I'm playing either this version of my A minor 7 chord or this version. But it's the same 3 notes. It's always A, C, and G. So if I were playing through the first 8 measures of my song, I'm going to start with A minor 7, going to D minor 7, to G7, going to 2 beat C major, C7, F major 7, and then I'm going to jump up to here to play my B minor, E7, and then A minor, which will morph into an A7, etc. Right? So I started here, and I could have started up here, A minor, and then my nearest D minor, because that's the idea. You try as much as possible to go to the nearest next chord. So if I play my A minor 7th here, my nearest D minor is going to be here, and then the nearest G7 is going to be here. The nearest C major 7 is here. It morphs into C dominant 7, and then it resolves into F major 7, continues down to B minor. Now it's a B minor 7 flat 5, right? But since I said we're putting the fifths aside, I'm treating it as a regular B minor chord. So I have B minor, E7, and then A minor. So step one, be able to play those kind of voicings. And the roots will help you locate the voicings. You know, if you know the root, where the root of each chord is, then you can build the chord. So you memorize. And actually, what I didn't tell you also, there are two options for each and every chord. I told you that for the A minor chord, but that's the case for every single chord. So if I have, let me play everything from C, for instance. So C major 7th, I have either this version of it, so it's C, B, E, or C, E, B, if my root is on the 5th string. If I make the chord a dominant chord, I'm going to have C, B flat, E, or C, E, B flat. If I make it a minor 7th chord from C, so I'm going to have here C, B flat, E flat, and from here C, E flat, B flat. So what happens every time the 3rd and the 7th are flipped around? But it's always the same 3 notes, right? And that's pretty much it. With those 6 shapes, you pretty much can play through all the tune. So once you can do that, all you have to do is simply remove the bass note. So for instance, when I was playing my A minor to my D minor to my G to my C, if I remove the bass, what I'm left with is this. That's D minor, this is G7, and this is C major 7, which then will morph to a C7, so it's only 2 beats each. I'm playing a little bit at a time. F major 7, B minor, E7, A minor. See how those notes really unwind very nicely? Let me do it in time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, D minor to G7 to C major to C7, F, B minor to E7 to A minor, dominant, D minor, I continue here, G7, and then C major. Now I need to go back up, and so on. So it's really important to first play the chords with the bass notes as guides, you know, visual guides. That way you don't have to necessarily know all the names of all the notes that you're playing. I mean, it's kind of a shortcut. I'm not saying it's down the road it's the best way, but at least it will get you started. So once you start playing and hearing those 3rds and 7ths only, what you want to do is play through them, bouncing back and forth between the 3rd and 4th string, because that's all that we're using at this point, right? And make sure that you play the 3rd first. It guarantees that you enter the chord correctly and you exit the chord correctly. That's something we talked about a few weeks ago. You always enter the chord, ideally speaking, you enter the chord through the 3rd, but you exit it through the 7th, and that will take you very near the 3rd of the next chord, at least on this tune, or on any time you have a 2-5-1 or a 3-6-2-5, you know, any kind of chord progression that moves through a cycle of 4ths, essentially. So what I'm talking about is this. I'm going to play the third first, then the seventh, third of D minor, seventh. This is the third of the G chord. That's the seventh of the G chord. Down a half step, I enter through the third of my C major, seventh. Now I'm going to repeat the E because now I need to play the C dominant seven. A is the third of my F chord. E is the seventh. D is the third of my B minor. A is the seventh of my B minor. Down a half step, I'll find the G sharp, which is the third of my E7. And D is the seventh of my E7. If I go down the whole step, I'll land on the third of my A minor chord, and so forth. So in time, I get something like this: 3, 4, 2. Second half and so forth. So I'm literally dancing between the third and fourth string and humming along, because also that's, I know I keep saying the same thing, but that's crucial, that's important. You play those notes, you learn where they are, you learn to hear what they sound like, and eventually you hum them, because that becomes second nature. And the more you internalize those notes, the less you need to think about what they're called. Simple enough, right? So find it in different places. You know, I started with the A minor here. I could have started here. And so forth. It still will bounce back and forth between the third and fourth string. Eventually, not right now if this is new to you, but eventually you'll play those notes on another pair of strings, like the third and second string. That would be your A minor, that would be your D minor, this is your G7, this is your C major 7, C dominant 7, this is F major, this is B minor, etc., etc. Eventually you'll do the same thing on the top two strings. So this would be A minor, this is D minor 7, this is G7, this is C major, C7, F major, etc. So you gradually learn to find all those notes on a pair of strings. And you can also bounce back and forth. So, jump to another pair. Like if this is A minor here, A minor here, A minor here. Or if you know them here, here, or here. And it's always 3, 7, 3, 7, 3, 7 as you go through different strings. Okay? But anyway, one thing at a time. So to recap, first, map out the song, this song, or again, any other chord progression. Map it out with your 3-note voicings, those shells, you know, root, third, and seventh. Then discard the bass, and you're left with just the third and seventh on strings 3 and 4. And then when you play those linearly, meaning one note at a time, you always make sure to play the third first. If you play the seventh first, it's going to be clumsy. So play the third first, and then the seventh, and then that way you gently weave your way through the chords. All right, so hope that clarifies it. And this is it. No more video. No worries. No more video on Fly Me to the Moon, at least for now. Okay, bye.